Today we're going to find out a little more about the assessment process in the City of Suffolk. So when you get your assessment notice, what do you need to look for? And if you have questions, who do you need to contact? We're going to be covering all that today. Joined now by City Assessor Billy Butt, who has been with the City of Suffolk just a little bit over a year, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Well, again, welcome again. That's the first time we've had you on this particular program. And today we're going to be talking about what the City Assessor's Office does, how the staff is made up, and again, with the assessments coming out spring of 2022, what you may want to do to look at that assessment notice to kind of check some details. And if you have any questions, how to get in contact with their office and work through the process if you have an appeal or anything that needs to come up. So first up, when we talk about City Assessor, or the City Assessor's Office, what is the role? What is y'all's job in its basic sense?
So the role of the City Assessor is to identify, list, and appraise all real property within the City of Suffolk. Further, it's our duty to ensure that the assessments are fair and equitable, and that ensures that the burden of taxation is spread equally among the property owners. So.
Now, when you talk about making sure it's accurate and equitable and everything, what is the time frame? Because I know in the past we've always heard sometimes assessments lag sales, but how closely tied to each other time-wise are we talking about generally?
So they do lag sales,
right,
in some aspects.
Sure.
But so we reassess every year,
right,
and we start looking at market data from January 1 through December 31st, and then sometime right after the first of the year, we develop our final numbers based on that data.
Right.
And the assessments are as of January 1.
Got it.
However, when they become effective for taxing purposes,
right,
is not till July 1. So
correct,
there's your little lag.
I understand,
there.
yeah.
So at January 1, we're hopefully at 100%,
Sure,
or right around that. And then by July 1, there's been 6 months of market activity, correct, and we could be on either side of that.
Gotcha. I've heard the phrase, the expression used, and I just want to be clear on what we're talking about when we refer to that and the time frame. Now, one pronoun you just used was we, so obviously it's not just you in the City Assessor's Office. We have a staff over there. How are y'all made up, and what are sort of the roles of the people that work with you?
So we have 19 employees right now. We do have a couple of vacancies that we're going to fill hopefully soon. Mm-hmm. Of those 19, 9 of them are appraisers, and their daily job is assessing, and they have a list of neighborhoods that they work in. They have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 parcels for each that they're looking at. So they stay very busy with that. And then we have 6 administrative personnel that handle our veterans program, our senior and disabled program, and our land use program. Right. And then our IT functions are included there. And then we have 4 management people. That includes me. Mm-hmm. And those 4 people, including myself, are intimately involved in the valuation process as well. So.
Gotcha. Well, we're talking about mid-March right now, today's taping, and assessment notices are in the process of going out, probably hitting mailboxes, and if they haven't already, by the time some people may see the program. So when people get their assessment notice this year, and you mentioned that it's done annually, what should they be looking for on that piece of paper, or those documents that are included in there? What are the things that you would say as a homeowner or property owner, hey, you want to look at these items?
So, first and foremost, look at the value, mm-hmm, and just contemplate, is this fair? Is this what I really think my home is worth?
Right.
But don't concentrate just on that, because the notice has a lot of information on it. It's a 2-sided sheet, and the front sort of discusses the value and gives you the last 3 years of values and the percentage that it is increasing. Then we've got a section on there about appeals, and it talks about the time, sure, frame for appeals and the process there. And then the backside talks about what we do and how we do it.
Right.
So it's very informative, and look at it, read over it, and if you have any questions, certainly call our office.
So if someone gets their assessment notice, they do have those questions. I know there's a couple of different stages or steps they can go through with your office to talk with staff or maybe eventually wind up with an appeal process. How does that process evolve, and what would you say is the first step to take? Literally picking up the phone and calling, or coming by, or what should they do?
Absolutely. The first step really is to pick up the phone and call or come by.
Sure.
And get your property record card. Look at the record. If there's an error on it, we have to fix it. You know, let us know. That's the first step in getting the assessment correct. The second thing is, in that process, we would go through an informal hearing.
Got it.
Where you would sit down with your appraiser and discuss your property and how we arrived at that value. So beyond that, and it's all right there on the notice, right, is a formal appeal to the Board of Equalization. Mm-hmm. And for those that may not know, the board is separate of our office. It's a 3-member panel. It's appointed by the circuit court. Mm-hmm. And they come in and they hear both sides. Right. And they make a decision, and their decision can be to affirm the value, to increase the value, or decrease it. Got it. And I think it's important to note that when you do appeal, you know, the potential is there for your value to get increased. Correct. Because we could have, you know, you could have built a garage that we didn't have on the record, sure, anything like that. So just be aware of that, but we certainly welcome the calls, and it's part of what we do.
Well, you mentioned the property record card for each particular property. What are the things on there that people, where you mentioned the word error? And again, is it square footage that we're typically talking about, or additions or upgrades that may have been done that all factor into that? Those are the things we're talking about that are considered? Right.
Square footage, room count, bedrooms, bathrooms, decks, porches, pools are a big thing that tend to sometimes be missed. Mm-hmm. Any of those things that you think are not correct on your record, we need to correct it. Some of them drive value, some of them don't.
Gotcha. Now, as far as when people come for the informal process, we'll back it up to that for a second. What type of documentation should they have? Pictures, is that helpful? Is it just, if they've had maybe an appraisal done on their own, those kind of things, would you bring to the table to say, this is what I've got here and the dates and everything on that?
Definitely.
Okay.
And state code is written so that the burden of proof is on the taxpayer. So an assessment has the presumption of correctness. Okay. And they have to be able to refute that. Got it. An appraisal is a great thing to have. Those private appraisals, for whatever reason they're done, an appraiser has probably come and pulled a tape. Right. And there may be a difference that we can glean from that. So any records they have, any sales they can put together, that kind of thing. So
now, in the assessment world, and I'm not an assessor, but I'll rely on your expertise, when they talk about comparables, so when you're looking to determine the value, obviously, if I've owned a home for a particular period of time, it obviously hasn't been sold, it's just sitting there, but if neighboring homes or homes that are equivalent in value or makeup or whatever are sold, that will affect what we're talking about, correct?
Exactly.
Right, okay.
And, if you're going to bring in comparable sales, to talk to us about and say, hey, did y'all see this one, and how does it compare?
Sure.
Just try to get them in your neighborhood and as similar style and construction quality and all that as your
because that's what y'all were looking for and using in your evaluations as well, correct?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. Yes.
Now, how often do your appraisers go out and sort of put eyes on a property, or how is that process done? Because sometimes it's a numbers-based thing, sometimes it may be, I'll call it putting eyes on a property, but how does that process work?
So that's a constant process, and it's really triggered by sales. So when we get sales in a neighborhood, in a particular neighborhood, the appraiser for that neighborhood will go out, ride by that sale. Sometimes they try to get in it. Right. They'll walk around it, hopefully, if the property owner will allow that.
Sure.
And that sort of starts the process.
Correct.
And you know, as you're out there, you're riding through the neighborhood, you're looking at what's going on, and of course we can't get in every property.
Right.
We're appraising 47,000
Can ask you
parcels.
with the you knew the number, but yeah.
So it's you know, a little more than that, including the tax exempt parcels,
Sure.
but it's a lot.
Gotcha.
And you know, so it's a process, and you know, our appraisers are on the street every day.
Now, when the informal process, so if a homeowner or a property owner should say goes through that process and they're not satisfied with the result, is that when it goes to the formal process? I mean, obviously, if they're satisfied there and they come to an agreement or they understand, they go, well, okay, I see where you're coming from. Is that where it stops based on the homeowner driving it forward to the formal process?
Correct.
Okay.
If,
yeah.
You
okay.
know, even if, you know, a lot of times they're not happy, but they end up not applying to the board.
Sure.
So I guess, you know, it's a decision they make
Right.
going forward
Mhm.
beyond the informal appeal.
Right.
And we try to work
Sure,
with them
of
on the
course.
informal side
Sure.
because we're doing assessments or appraisals in mass. So we're appraising big groups of property. And
Sure.
like I said, we haven't been in every one of them.
Right.
And hopefully in the appeals process, especially the informal side, the owner will allow us access. We
Right.
try to do that.
Mhm.
And, you know, our goal is to get the record correct.
Sure, sure. Now, the formal process, I mean, is it a one-day thing? Is it a couple hours that we're generally setting aside if it gets to that point that that's where the homeowner sits down and, again, that's evaluated in that perspective?
Yeah, it depends on how in-depth the
Okay.
homeowner wants to go. And, you
Sure.
know, it could be something real simple
Right.
that we spot right away
Right.
and we'll fix it.
Got it.
So,
Got it. Okay. Well, it seems like you definitely have staff that are available and they know when those assessments come out, the questions are going to be coming in, and you have folks not only to answer the phone, but walk-in traffic. Would you want to schedule an informal hearing? I assume because you got to get all the parties together, even on that process, but you could talk with staff to get that on the books, so to speak,
yes.
right?
So when you call in, the initial call, you won't speak directly to the appraiser.
Got it.
We have the people that answer the phones will take the information down, and then they feed it into our mass appraisal system, and it gets flagged to the appraiser. And then the appraiser is instructed to return calls within 4 business hours.
Okay.
And what that means, if there's a call in the morning,
Mhm.
you're going to get a call back that afternoon.
Got it.
If it's in the afternoon, it's probably going to be the next
Next day.
morning.
Got it.
So
Got it.
we get a lot of calls, and we work very hard to
Right.
return them. And,
Right.
you know, it's one of my pet peeves to
Mhm.
make sure that we communicate with citizens.
That's a pretty good turnaround, considering how many properties you're talking about. I mean, 430 square miles, we're packing them in there.
That's right.
And we know that number continues to grow each year. So your databases continue to get larger, and I guess with the volume of properties that you're dealing with, to be able to respond in that manner is great. And I think,
Yes.
you know, people who own property here are thinking, okay, that's a pretty responsive department in that regard. So I think everybody appreciates that, and your philosophy, I guess, when it comes to that as well. So
Yeah, you know, I try to be as open as I can, and
Sure.
and if something needs to be escalated up to me, I don't shy away from taking phone calls. So
Got it.
just let the public know that as well.
Okay. So tax relief programs, I think you mentioned it a little bit. What programs are out there, and if people think they may qualify for that, or based on what you're getting ready to tell us, of course, what the basic qualifications are, you just kind of lay that out and maybe how people can kind of find out a little more about that information.
Sure. So we have tax relief for the elderly and disabled, and you know, there are certain qualifications that people have to meet. They are not administered in my office.
Right.
They're administered by social services.
Mhm.
And for those 2 programs, you can call social services between January 1st and June 30th is the application time. And then they then share that information with us,
Mhm.
and we take care of the exoneration
Got it.
on the record so that they're billed correctly.
Okay.
And then there's a disabled veterans program, and that program is also administered in social services, and that's for veterans who are 100% disabled, service-related disability, and you will get 100% relief from your taxes. And again, you can apply for that at any time
Okay.
during the year.
But again, both of those programs you mentioned are done through social services.
That's correct.
As far as the paperwork side of things, I mean, again, y'all are looking at the results,
Correct.
how it factors into what you're going to do when you send out that assessment, how that gets not billed, but allocated and distributed in that manner.
Correct.
Now, land use program, that's in your office, though, correct?
Yes,
As far
sir.
Specifically, as far as administered and everything there, right?
Yes, sir. And the land use program is dedicated to the preservation of land,
Mm-hmm.
and basically the values are based on use value versus market value, and they're administered in our office. There are 3 types of property that qualify in Suffolk, and it's agricultural, horticultural, and forestry
Got it.
lands. So you can call our office, ask to speak to our land use coordinator, and she's there. If she's on the phone or busy, she'll get back to you as soon as possible. So.
Now, how much, and I don't know if there's a percentage of the property that's being utilized for those purposes, and only that percentage qualifies, or does a certain percentage mean the whole property qualifies, or how does that kind of run?
It depends on how much land they have,
Right.
how much is. You could have all 3 types on
Right.
your property. So you could have forestry, agriculture,
Right.
and horticultural
Gotcha.
on your property. So it
Okay.
depends on how many acres you've.
Using for those
Correct,
purposes? Yeah,
correct,
right,
yeah,
I got you.
yeah, yeah.
And again, there's the 3 categories that you talked about. So, I mean, I know, certainly I think in the city of Suffolk, again, being as large as we are and it's spread out, I mean, I think we know there's properties that do qualify for that. So again, if there's more, and is that a year-round program where you can get in and out of it, or is there a certain
Yes.
time period? There is.
Yes, and we have 2,000 parcels roughly in that program in
got it.
Suffolk.
Okay.
This year, as a matter of fact, they get revalidated every 5th year,
Mm-hmm.
and this year we're revalidating some 650 parcels.
Got it.
So it's a big
Got it.
year for us.
Okay. Okay. Now, fair market value, I will back up again, which is a number I know that's on the assessment. What does that number mean, or what does that phrase mean, and how does it equate to a dollar amount or a dollar value for the particular property?
So if a taxpayer goes into Google and just Googles fair market value, they're
Right.
going to get 100 definitions.
Sure.
More than that, I'm sure. In my world, state of Virginia,
Right.
the definition basically is the price that a property will bring if it's offered for sale by someone who desires to sell it but is not obligated to, and bought by someone who's under no necessity of having it. So basically it's a property that's been listed on the open market, and both the buyer and seller are in no undue pressure to either buy it or sell it. So to arrive at fair market value is a process, and it involves many layers of analysis and statistical testing. In the assessment world, we use what's called a mass appraisal technique, whereby we appraise large groups of properties, like properties. We appraise them in groups, and we come up with individual values that way. We're still obligated to consider the 3 generally accepted approaches to value, which are the market or sales comparison approach, the cost approach, the income approach. Sales comparison approach is best used for residential properties. Cost approach is best used for new construction and special use properties where there's really not a market.
Right.
And then the income approach is typically applied for commercial or investment properties. So we consider all those. We have to consider all 3 for all parcels.
Right.
And then we use those that produce results that are credible for each individual parcel.
Now,
And just
sure.
part of our testing on that is when we go into our reassessment, we look at our sales ratios, and that's our sales price, our assessment as it relates to sales prices.
Right.
And the goal is 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So if we see a ratio in a neighborhood that's 81%, we know we're low.
Right.
Conversely, if we see one that's 116%, we know we're high and assessments have to come down.
Got it.
So last year, for example, when I first got here and we did our reassessment, we were at about 96% overall.
Right.
By July 1, when the values became effective,
Mm-hmm.
we were down in the low 80s, almost 70. So the market was really moving fast.
Right. Right.
And this year, I think our reassessment, you're going to see large value increases. It's all market driven,
Mm-hmm.
but I tried to be a little conservative,
Sure.
understanding this market and all of its strange things that are going on in
Right,
it. So,
I understand. Yeah, it's definitely, I think we're all still adjusting to whatever kind of quote unquote new norm there may be, and that goes in a lot of different ways, not just property values. But what would you say to someone, and we have a couple minutes left in the segment, who goes, well, I Googled my house and it said it's worth this, and you're telling me it's worth that? In a general sense, I'm not looking to name names on firms, not to say they're doing anything wrong, but just I know that you get a lot of that, I'm sure.
yeah, and I think, those services serve a purpose.
Correct.
But you might have a 1,500 square foot brick ranch that service that you Google or find on the internet
Sure.
is comparing to all the sales in your neighborhood
Right.
versus the ones that are more comparable to your house.
Correct.
So when you come in and sit down with your appraiser, they'll go over that with you and
Sure.
how those differences are taken into consideration.
Gotcha. Well, we have just a couple minutes left, but I want to give you an opportunity again to talk about if someone has questions or would like more information about their property or just maybe the assessment process in general. What would you tell them to do? What's the best way to?
Best thing to do is call us.
Mhm.
We're here for you. We work for the citizens,
Sure.
and we're here. 514-7475, and talk to whoever answers the phone. Try to get an appointment with your appraiser, and they'll call you back, and we'll talk about it.
Great. Well, pretty simple. Very customer service friendly, and I know y'all are open Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5, just like
That's
the rest
correct.
of us here at City Hall. So again, very accessible. Again, the phone. Do you have an email address too that people can email questions, or do you kind of really more prefer to talk with them about what's
We
going on?
prefer to talk with
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
We have an email address.
Sure.
You can get it off our website.
Perfect. Okay.
And we're. I will say this is an exciting thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
Is, at some point this year, we're going to debut a new website.
Okay.
And it's really, really going to have a lot of great information on it that you can go into your parcel
Mhm.
and you'll be able to get all the data you need to file an appeal. You'll
Right.
be able to get sales.
Perfect.
All that. So we're working real hard on that right now.
Looking forward to that. Trying to juggle that again with all the assessments coming out or reassessments coming out to get that process done and the appeals or any questions people have. A lot to juggle right there. As we said, it's how many properties approximately?
47,000
And ever growing, right?
plus or minus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There you go.
So, and yes, the growth is
Yes.
off the charts.
Yes,
So,
indeed. Well, Billy, I appreciate your time today to talk about the assessment process, talk about your office and how the staff's made up and what the folks in there that are doing on a day-to-day basis and the great work they keep doing. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Well, that would do it for this edition of On the Scene. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. We will see you next time.